Welcome to At the Buzzer, everyone. Hopefully, everybody had a good trading day today. Let us know how you did in the chat. Whether you're up on the day, down on the day. We'll get started in just a few. Wait, I think I'm missing somebody. Hold on a second. I told you guys I had a guest. Who's that guy there? Who is that guy there?
Uh, Good to be back, Coach Jay.
Welcome back. You guys let me know. Let's do an audio check. See if we can hear Coach Paul, if we can see Coach Paul. Let us know how he sounds and he
Check,
looks.
check, and hope everybody's having a good day, or at least a controlled day. Probably wasn't an easy day.
Definitely not an easy day for me. As you can see on this Topstep Combine, I'm down. My personal account, I'm down, all trying to buy the ES, but we'll get into that a little bit later. We get some confirmations from Andre, Nick Fortick in the chat. Both sound great. Both look great as well. I'm looking on my side. Looking good, Coach. Glad to have you back.
Glad to be back.
And welcome everyone to At the Buzzer. If this is your first time joining us, I am Coach Jay. That is Coach Paul. The goal of this segment is to review what happened in the markets for the day. We may talk about some markets that you have not traded before, but our goal as traders is to identify opportunity, see how we could have taken advantage of those opportunities while managing our risk. Before we get into all of that, though, I'm going to let Coach Paul do a little introduction about himself. You guys know me a little bit. I'm Coach Jay, been a Topstep Performance Coach for a little over a year. But I did my intro last week. Coach, I'm going to go ahead and go on mute, let you intro yourself, and then we'll go ahead and get into these markets.
All right. Well, good to be back, Coach Jay. Great job. I always look forward to working. I consider Coach Jay a teammate. I really enjoy working with him. Um, Myself, I've been around the futures markets for better part of 4 decades. Started on the trading floor when I was 18 years old. I started at an exchange called the Mid-America Commodity Exchange. That was right across the street from the Chicago Board of Trade, and it specialized in mini contracts. It was a great place for young traders to learn how to trade. Yeah, mini contracts. It, th- it, so it, Funny today, we all talk about minis and now micros. Um,
It's where the mini started.
it's where the mini started, and like I said, it was a great place to learn. A lot of great traders came out of there. If the old saying was, if you could make money at the mid am, you're going to do really well at the board of trade or the mark. So a
Nice.
lot of traders who left there, who honed their skills, went to the bigger exchanges and did well. One of the most famous alumni is a guy named Richard Dennis,
Okay.
um, who turned in 70, started in 74, turned a couple $1,000 to, by the end of the 80s, he was worth $100 million. Very famous trader, started the
Great
group, the
return on
Turtle
capital.
Traders. Great return on capital. Um, he was the beginning of what the term trend trader. He coined that. He trained a lot of traders. I happen to know a few of them from being at the mid am. Some did fabulously well, and some couldn't keep it going. It's the nature of this business.
Yep.
Um, that's why one of the things, I spent 25 years on trading floors. I enjoyed it immensely, because of not only just trading, but I met a lot of different people and I learned a lot.
Yep.
There was a lot of wisdom there. Without that, I don't think I would have survived. And then believe me, I've made all the mistakes that this that trading can
Present
give
to
you.
you. Yeah.
Yes,
There's a lot of them.
so,
Um,
sometimes more than I will ever admit.
right.
So, with that, why am I at Topstep? And I just said there was a lot of wisdom, and I gained a lot of that wisdom. Um, part of if you were willing to listen and learn, you could you could really, it was better than anything else for trading.
Yeah.
Um, why when I went off the floor, I really missed that. A lot of great friends, met a lot of people from all over the world, but I really missed that environment.
Yeah.
Um, and then I saw
It's what we're
Top
building
many
here.
years ago. That's what we're building here. And what Topstep offers is a platform to learn, to, struggle well. This is not an easy thing to do. So, um, I'm I really was really thrilled when I first saw it. And I had an opportunity to become a coach. And one of the things when you coach, you learn this. There's an old saying: "As you teach, you learn." So I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from Coach Jay, and following volume. Um, and I've incorporated that in my trading, and
Nice.
I want to thank him.
My guy.
Um, but here's a platform that goes around the world, and that you can learn and you can gain wisdom, because all wisdom comes from experience. Right? We can, you have to have experience. You can read all you want in a book, but trading,
Got to get
the
out there.
biggest part, you got to get out there. As Ray Dalio says, learn to struggle well.
Yep.
Because if coach, I'm going to ask you, do you struggle still?
Oh, I struggled a lot today. We're gonna get into that, but yeah, there are struggles. Absolutely. I think what you're kind of getting to is you learn how to deal with those struggles, right? Where every trader is going to have them. Every trader is going to have losses, but you start to learn that it's part of the process, it's part of the business, and they're necessary parts of it. So yeah, I struggle all the time. Struggle with
Yes.
emotions, making decisions. It happens, and I don't know that that's something that goes away. We
No,
got
it's a constant struggle, right? But
always.
we learn to struggle well, because I've coached basketball from grammar school level to varsity high school. And one of the things, I love sports. I've played sports all my life, many different sports, from rugby in college to water polo in high school, swimming, basketball. I love football. I love sports. Sports gives us the life lessons that really resonate in trading.
For sure.
Um, so that's my background. I hope to add more. I'll tell you more about myself, and I'm here to teach and to learn. So
Awesome.
with
Uh,
that, let's get into the markets today.
let's get into it. We'll talk about the top percentage movers again. Thank you, Coach Paul, for being here. Like Coach Paul said, I learned a ton from him as well. Just kind of working with each other over the last year or so. And the reason the segment is called At the Buzzer is because both of us are basketball coaches, right? The one reason I really love working with Coach Paul, and it comes out every now and then. Coach Paul is a Chicago guy. That kind of hard nosed Chicago basketball coach comes out every now and then. A lot of times when I've seen it is when I go to Coach Paul and say, hey, I did such and such in my trading. And then I get the no BS response, which I think we all need. So thank you as always for that, Coach Paul, for that kick in the
You're
ass
welcome.
sometimes when I need it. But let's get into these markets. Top percentage movers on the day. We had the RBOB down 1.67%, crude oil down 1.68%, and wheat futures down 2.07% for our biggest percentage mover to the downside. To the upside, we have Ethereum futures up 1.76, Platinum futures up 2.02%, and micro Bitcoin up 3.19% for our biggest percentage mover on the day. Again, with the equities, we got the Nasdaq up 0.52%. Not much of a big move. If you saw what the equities did today, they were kind of chopping around. And let's get right into that, Coach. There was not a lot going on as far as news today. We know we
No.
have Jackson Hole starting tomorrow. Uh, can you talk a little bit about that while I pull up these Nasdaq charts? I want to frame some stuff out.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Um, Earlier today, there was an employment number, a revision number. That kind of botched on the release.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Um, I saw an article in Bloomberg saying that mm, perhaps the banks had that number before the rest of us.
Huh.
Um,
Wouldn't be the first time.
so yeah, it wouldn't be the first time. It won't be the last. And the thing I learned from that is I make my decisions on market movement, not on the number itself. I focus on risk management. So that it was interesting that we had a rally break with relatively light volume. Um, so I would leave the volume to you, but we held the pivot earlier in the day in the S&P at around the 24 level. Played around, but VWAP stayed above that. So it was not an easy day to trade equities.
No, not at all. Pretty range bound. In a tight range. In the S&P, we had about a 40-point range. There was opportunity. Coach, you know I say it all the time. I'm not the greatest range round trader. Been improving at it, but that's what was required for the day. We'll go with the S&Ps first, and then we'll go into into the Nasdaq. I'm gonna pull up the moving averages that I've gotten from you, Coach. The 20, 50, and 200 moving average. We talked about this a little bit earlier this week, where we're well above the 200 moving average on the 30-minute chart, but the 20 and the 50 are starting to kind of braid around each other, right? Where when we see this, it usually means the market's going to be in balance. It makes sense that we have, bigger news potentially later in the week. We're going to, be hearing a lot from Powell tomorrow and Friday, most likely. So the market looks like it's waiting right now. I did forget that we had that jobless uh, number, the revision, and maybe I forgot it because they almost forgot it, right? They almost forgot
Yeah,
to release the number. We're all sitting there waiting at 9 a.m. Like, all right, let's hear it so we can trade. And that was a weird release of that number. If we look at the
yeah,
markets, go ahead.
that was that was a problem.
Yeah,
Um, and also we have big Fed meeting in Jackson Hole,
right.
and that matters until Powell speaks. Um, the Jackson Hole meeting is the movers and shakers in the financial um, industry, as bank heads and Fed Fed heads. It matters. So when that news comes out, I think the bigger money is sitting on the sidelines.
Do you think that we are going to hear anything in the next couple of days that would move the markets? We have the rate cut likely next month. Right now, the last time we looked at this number on the FedWatch tool, we were looking at a 75% chance of a 25 basis point cut. Right now, I just checked that number. It's right around 63% now. We're probably not going to hear anything in Jackson Hole that's going to move the markets. Is my assumption. What do you think about that?
Well, it's moving the, the the interest rate markets, the treasuries.
Got you.
Um, the 5 year is having a pretty good rally today. It's a rare thing. The 5 year was up 6 points, and the bonds were only up 3. That doesn't happen that often. So it's a sign of easing. I take that as the news coming out of Jackson Hole from larger banks is that there's going to be a cut. I don't know. I trade in the present, but looking at that information um, and seeing that the short end of the yield curve is starting to go back to where it's traditionally it's a sign of easing coming. I
Okay,
think that's fueling this bottom line in the market in the equities market.
got you. So no surprise rate cuts or anything like that coming up this week. Hopefully not. And
I
we don't know it. And if we
no,
do, we'll just trade it. We'll trade the reaction to
if I was expecting it, it wouldn't be a surprise now, would
it.
it?
There we go. There we go. So, like you said in the ES today, Coach, pretty balanced. I know you had a pivot down here, 56.24. I'm going to throw the top step daily levels on here as well. If you don't use these, I would suggest having them up on your charts if you have Top Step X. These are levels that are shared by, well, the Top Step levels right now are shared by Hogue, but on the Top Step Daily Levels website as well, levels shared by all of our coaches, Coach Paul being one of them, and his pivot levels play out pretty often. I gave Hogue the moniker of Hoagie Berra. I'm gonna have to find one for you, Coach Paul, with your levels as well, because they play out. We see the ES bounced pretty close to weekly kickoff low in the right around 56.12. We had, sorry, weekly kickoff high 56.12. We sold off
Those are
to
great
it.
numbers.
Great numbers. It
Yeah.
held and just bounced. It pretty much set the low of the range. And shout out to Hogue. He sent me some messages in Slack when it did it. And he's just like, here they go playing out again. So I would suggest anyone to keep those levels on your charts. Uh, but again, a pretty balanced day, not much market moving news, and maybe the market waiting for what's going to come out
Yeah, as we say it, technically it was range bound, but there were some good opportunities.
for sure.
Um, I'm only looking to buy, um, and
And why
I
is that?
did. Well, I was taught by a great trader named Peter Stottlemyre. In any market and any given day, he said, "Kid, you got to take one side."
Okay,
Um, Whether it's a range bound or it's a trend day, it makes it easier to manage the trade.
got you.
Um, Me personally, my biggest problems came when I would get short at the bottom and long at the high, and it would end up in the middle.
Yeah, but
So
if you choose one direction before uh, you even make a decision, then that kind of guides all your trades.
it helps me a lot.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it was
Makes a
some
lot
of
of
the
sense.
best advice I ever got.
Yeah, I think we talked about that even a little bit. I know you were on with Andre and Dolby last week, trying to
Mhm.
work through that house account process and maybe only looking at one side. How do you determine what direction you're going to be looking at for a specific market?
Okay, great question. Like I said, I grew up in the trend trading uh, era.
Yep,
So I start with the daily, and that's why I use that 200-day moving average.
got you.
So if you bring that S&P up to the daily, it gives me the longer term trend.
To the upside.
Um, what is it? It's Coach Dakota. It's perma bear. I mean, excuse me, perma bull.
Right. Where do we buy it?
Look at how much time it spends above it. Now, that gives me my direction.
Yep.
And then I bring it down to the 30-minute and use the 200 for a place to lean on. Um, so if we bring up the 30-minute and look at the,
Yep. I got you.
so we're above the 200. Um, I'm still going to look for a place to buy it, and then I will use the pivot
And
and
that's what I want to ask you about. So, if you guys were in the chat a little earlier today during Topstep TV, Coach Paul had called out a pivot in the Nasdaq. I know it played out in the S&P. That
mhm.
pivot in the Nasdaq. Do you remember what that number was, Coach?
Yeah, I have it right in front of me. That level was
And again, we're bouncing back and forth between the Nasdaq and the ES. They pretty much did the same thing from a
nine
technical perspective, range bound. But what was that pivot, Coach?
830 area, 828.
830. Gotcha.
830, 828 area. And I believe these are areas. What I
Right.
really liked about that, it was above VWAP too. And it's been holding this rally. It's been holding the pivot and holding the VWAP above it.
Really nice. Yeah, we can see how many
So
times that level played out. I'm looking at the chart here, right? We had a bounce from the market open. We pretty much bounced right off of that 830.
yeah,
And then the sell off after the news release, we pretty much consolidated around there again, right? We had that heavy volume come down into this pivot again, but really no follow through below that level. Are you looking at these as I want to see the market's reaction to it? I know you're leaning buy side because of the higher time
yeah.
frame trend we're up, but if we sell under that pivot, how do
I'm not
you
getting
read that?
short.
Got you. Not
I
getting
I
short. Awesome.
don't get short. Like I said, I'll take one side. I can do that and manage my risk.
Yeah,
Um, at the bottom line, as a trader, you're a risk manager.
correct.
Think like a risk manager. It's a great opportunity at Top Step to show that you can manage risk.
Yep.
If you can manage risk and you do it well over time and you prove yourself, there's plenty of money. I mean, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I might give you a couple dollars if you can manage your risk.
So going back to that pivot was a good place to lean against buying. Also, by the way, the S&P popped to the first resistance level.
Okay.
So the first resistance in the S&P, I think it was 5639, 5640 area. And if it goes from the pivot to the first resistance, it's a good place to book some profit.
Nice. Yeah, we had that 5640 yesterday's high as well. We made highs on the day in the ES at 5655. I know Nick Vertick was talking about some of the options, positions that were out there. He took a short right off that 5655. So a lot of information being shared on Topstep TV, whether it's, from our coaches, the daily levels, the, participants we have on screen, a lot going on there. I know the house account took a little bit of an L today, trying to buy the market, which depending on where your position was, whether you bought it or sold it, you may have had the direction right, but location was extremely important. I think when I look at range bound trades and range bound days, that's the most important, right? There really isn't a direction. The market didn't go up or down. But if you're going to take trades, the location is extremely important. That's where I messed up today. I tried to buy right around that 5640 area on the way down, right in this candle that was 948 Central Time. Tried to buy the NASDAQ, the ES there, and really just sold right through it. So location for me, right in the middle of the
Location,
range,
location, location.
it's all that matters. All that matters. You can have that direction right. If your location is wrong, it can be a losing trade. Coach, anything else you got on the
Yeah, I had
equities?
some losers today too.
Okay, what'd
I
you
was
trade today?
buying it. I ended up making a little bit. Well, I got long the second time when it got to the pivot,
Yeah.
and then it finished under the pivot, and I took a loss.
What price was that pivot
Um,
again?
uh, in the S&P, the pivot was 24,
56.24.
56.24.
Got you.
Yeah, see, yeah, I bought it, got under it, and I bought it again.
Okay.
Now, we talk about risk management. I also budget a certain amount of loss as it
Hmm.
relates to my account. I'm not going to keep buying it all the time. If I'm down 12% of my account on any given day, it's over. Done. Done. I'm not seeing it, right?
Right.
In basketball, if you have a player who's turning it over more than every time he touches it,
Got a
probably a good
seat right
idea
next
to
to me.
sit him on the bench.
Got a
Yes,
seat
come
right
here,
next to
son.
me. Let's watch the game instead of playing it. Yeah.
And and I do that. Hey, I I lose.
Yep. But you're gonna measure how much you lose, which I think we all need to do. And you can do that on TopStep X, right? You have a daily loss limit. You have a daily profit target for those reasons. Because a lot of times when we take those losses, if it's not measured prior to, that's when those losses get a lot bigger, right? If we don't say how much we're going to lose before we lose it, then we're having to make those decisions under pressure. And who here makes great decisions under pressure? I know I don't, right? I'd like to have a plan before, and then when that pressure comes, I can just, respond to it instead of trying to figure out what it is that I'm going to do.
So well said. That's why one of the, I consider it revolutionary to have that personal daily loss limit,
Yep.
because everybody's like, well, how do I, when tilt comes, how do I recognize that? And I've coached, I've played, I've traded. I don't, when you're in that mode,
Yeah.
I don't, it's too late. If you have your personal daily loss limit and tie that into percentage of your equity, that's what you need.
Right.
I, it, it's what I think it's the greatest thing that's happened for trading, since electronic trading.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's get into some other markets. We saw what the equities did. Actually, before we move on to that, what can we expect the rest of the week? For me personally, I'm going to be waiting, right? Where I took some losses today in a range bound market. I know the market may potentially be waiting for what we hear out of Jackson Hole. So I'm going to scale back a little bit, maybe trade micros instead of trading the mini contracts if I see any opportunities. But maybe being a little patient. Coach, what are you seeing for going into tomorrow or the rest of the week?
I'm a perma bull. I
Where do
see.
I buy it?
Yeah, where do I buy it? And where do I get out if I'm wrong?
Gotcha.
But yeah, this market looks, uh, well, I'm not big into prediction,
Of course.
but this has the DNA of going to all-time highs.
We're not far off of it. So the all-time high in the ES, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, all-time high 57.21 quarter. And we closed today right around 56.41. So less than 100 points away from an all-time high. Nick, if you're here, get your air horns ready. We might need them as early as tomorrow. The
It
one
could
thing,
happen.
it could very well could happen. The one thing I want to point out in the NASDAQ, we're a little bit further away. We have all-time highs in the Nasdaq at 2983. The Nasdaq did not trade above that major 20K level today, which is the only concern that I'm seeing, right? As we pushed up to that level, coach, I'm going to be reading the volume. We didn't even trade it, right? I think the high of the day was 19,981. Yep, 19,981 and the orders. We didn't even go test that 20K. So a little bit of a divergence there, and we'll talk about before we move on to gold and crude oil, this gap. So we talked about this gap yesterday, the high of the gap being right around 19,950 and the low of the gap being 19,881. Coach, I was telling you that the Nasdaq played this gap like a young Ken Griffey. Uh,
That was
we traded all in this gap and could not decide what we were going to do with it. We were short below it. A lot of indecision in the middle of it. So the Nasdaq still has some figuring out to do. Uh, the way I'm looking at this, it looks like the ES is leading, right? The ES has cleared this gap a couple of days ago, traded above the major level of 5,600. The Nasdaq still has not tested that 20K, and that's going to be a major level. It's a major psych level. Everyone who's trading the Nasdaq knows whether or not we're above or below that 20K. Let's see if tomorrow we get that test, and I'll be reading the volume to see how we trade it if and when we do.
And it's a good question. When you're looking at the volume, coming into the gap, what what would you be looking at? Like good volume through it, or
So when we approach, so really what I was looking at today was 50% of the gap, which was 19,915 around and 19,950 at the highs. I just want to see buying around those levels, right? Where we have this price action here, where we're looking at the Nasdaq trade through the gap, all on low volume, which to me just looks like, at least right now, buyers are not convinced. Of course, anything can happen, and when I zoom out on a higher time frame, obviously we're in an uptrend, but timing is kind of what I get from volume as well. And right now, I'm not seeing the buyers that say, hey, we need to go now. Maybe they're accumulating in this position where they're not letting the market drop either, right? So anytime we make any of these lows, we see selling come in. A lot of that selling is getting absorbed. What it looks like from a volume perspective is just accumulation in a zone. potentially for a push above that major 20K, right? Where if I'm going to be a buyer and I know and I think that the market's going above 20K, I want as much as my position below 20K as I could. And that's kind of what this looks like right now, where no one's coming in and just pushing it.
Yeah, that would correlate with the Jackson Hole meeting,
Right. Right.
right? Once that's done, we'll see.
We will see.
Because, all right,
We will see.
all
We got
right,
a we got a question real quick from John Brantley. Can you explain the correlation between the treasuries and the indices real quick?
it the correlation comes down to interest rates,
Okay.
cost. It's if the Fed is going to start easing, that's good news for equities. It's cheaper money. It's what institutions want to hear, right? Also, money flows between bonds
Hmm.
and equities, without getting deep into it, the 60/40, but it does. I mean, this is all signs are leaning towards a decent rate cut coming.
Gotcha.
What it is, I don't know. I don't care. I actually don't care to know. I care to know how the market reacts to it.
Correct. Because as day traders,
So,
that's what we have to trade.
right. But it's a great question. That's the correlation.
Absolutely. All right, so let's switch over to crude oil real quick. Crude oil was one of our biggest percentage movers to the downside. We were down 1.72% in crude oil today. And pretty much since rollover, coach, we've been selling off. And really, you know what I'm really talking about, since that $80 level.
You're not to mention that, coach.
And I mention it all the time for some reason, but
You ruined it. I was long up there when you said that.
oh, my bad.
Uh, well,
Hopefully you
I
took some
returned the
profits into that.
favor.
Into that, yeah.
I did.
But
I did.
nice, great trade. So that $80 level, since we checked that $80 level, we rolled over in crude. We have a little bit of this rollover gap here. It's just been a sell-off. Uh, we, we've been talking about what this downtrend looks like. If I pull up the moving averages, we're well below the 200 moving average, trending lower. The 20 and the 50 are trending lower as well, coach. And a
Mhm.
lot of that up move that we had to do with news in the Middle East. And when we're hearing talks of a peace deal, then we're seeing that crude oil price come down a little bit. From a fundamental perspective, from a technical perspective, I think if I watch slow markets with Dakota tonight, he's going to say he wants to buy crude around this area. What are you seeing in crude right now, coach?
I'm been selling it.
Okay.
I had a good pivot today of 73.36.
73.36. This guy here.
Yeah. Um, Early in the day, when the volume came in, we got above it. I'm only the the daily is below the 200,
Okay.
um, and the half hour was below it. But that pivot came after the news. Every Wednesday, there's a stocks report in crude, and it can be a big event or a non-event. I think most of the time it's a non-event.
It's the weatherman number. Their
uh,
forecasts are always wrong, but
the,
go ahead, coach.
see, right. You know what? Markets are never wrong,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
I have to deal with that, right? I'm wrong, and I have to know when I'm wrong. But here, what I noticed when we got under the pivot, we got under VWAP.
Mm.
So now we had that rally. It held, and I'm favoring the sell side. It's a good place to initiate a short.
Nice.
Um, the risk was, and we won't go through it now, but for our longer term viewers, is 2 ATRs.
Gotcha.
And then it really actually went. It got hit pretty quick and hard.
It did.
It actually went down to my third support, it's a rare thing. It's 71.52.
Amazing trade.
And it was a great trade. I wish I could get those. We need these. By the way, I trade many different markets.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
um,
One lot trader in a bunch of different
ten,
markets, right, Coach? One lot
right.
trader in 10 markets.
I don't want to be a 10 lot trader in one place. Just the way I'm a firm believer in diversification.
Gotcha.
Um, I never, and it works for me. I never was really good because at one place, it just makes it easier to trade for me. Um, so that one really worked.
Nice.
Um, but it feels very heavy. So the crude market is the there's a lot of supply out of crude,
Hmm.
and for the first time in years, I've seen that the the oil companies have some form of control. Um, and so it's over a longer term, it's a balanced market. So like I said, Coach Dakota is probably gonna look at this tonight and find a place to buy it. I
Right.
don't disagree with that.
Definitely not. If we look on a higher time frame, the one thing I do want to point out from a day trade perspective from today, 2 days ago, so today's Wednesday, Monday, we saw this pretty heavy selling come in from a volume perspective. The low of that candle, and this is a 3 minute candle that was 11:03 Central Time on Monday. Uh, a lot of heavy delta in that candle, Coach. We can see it from a volume perspective here, but if I'm on Quantower as well, I think in this 3 minutes there was about 1100 negative delta in that candle. We checked it yesterday.
Wow.
Sellers were still there, sold
I,
off from it again. And the lows of this candle are right around that 74.25 area. We checked it on the news this morning, checked up towards that level, couldn't trade in that zone again, and a really nice rejection. So there's a
wow, that's
seller.
beautiful, Coach. That's
there,
well defined.
there's a seller around there. Kind of wish I was trading crude instead of trying to figure out whatever the ES was doing today. But that's a personal thing. But really
Yeah.
nice trade from there. And if we go to a higher time frame, and why I said Dakota may be looking to buy this, and I don't. You said you don't disagree with it. I don't disagree either. If we're looking at the lows of August so far, 71.46, right? We made that low today. If we're going back to June, the lows of June were right around 72.50. So this looks like a higher time frame demand area. Of course, anything can happen, and it is a zone. It's not a perfect level because we also talked about if we zoom out on the daily chart, if we've come down this much, why not test 70, right? Why not test lower where we have some demand in the 68 area as well? So I don't think it's a blind buy. It's watch how the market responds in this zone where we have bounced before. Is the way I'm kind of looking at this
Yeah.
right now.
Well, what's it going to do? It can only go down to zero. Oh, wait. Oh,
Oh
wait.
man, man.
So, yeah,
If I had a genie and I got a couple wishes, one of them would wish to be a part of that trade just to see how it played out. I don't even think I was paying attention to crude oil then, but that is crazy. What was it? Negative $40 a barrel at the lows.
negative 35 to 40.
Yep.
I've been around for a long time. I've been a commodity trading advisor. I've been licensed. I've run large execution operations. I never knew any commodity could go below zero. I had covered a longer term short the day before at like 20, and I was feeling like the king. I'm like, well, how much farther can it go?
Right.
I w My jaw, I was stunned. What I was glad is I wasn't involved because there
Mm.
was people that didn't understand. I mean, like, come on, how can it?
Platforms didn't
But it
understand,
did.
right?
Platforms didn't understand.
Right.
It was, who understood was a group, and we'll save this story for another time. Was a group out of London of
Yes.
basis traders who made between, I guess, $70 million that day, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, our
Um.
job. cost to carry and basis trading. I won't go into it, but yeah,
Right.
that's who made money then.
Yeah. Hopefully we're a long way away from that now, unless you're short Crude from $80. But we will see what the market thinks about these prices, going into the rest of the week. I'm looking at that $70 level as, a potential magnet, just because it's a whole number. So we'll see how that works from there. Andre saying, yeah, he had no idea either. And then after that, right, Coach, I think we were talking about nat gas not that long ago. I'm like, hey, well, can that happen in nat gas also? Because it was in a really strong downtrend. I think it's bounced since then, but really interesting that did happen. We got gold left. Anything else you want to talk about in Crude before we move on, Coach?
Oh no, I want to get the gold.
That's the
It's been
one,
the
right?
gold star of trading.
That
That's
is the one. And today in gold, we did not make a new all-time high in gold today, but is still very much in this uptrend. Somewhat of a balanced day. Again, where we made all-time highs yesterday of 2570.4 and have been in balance since then. If you were trading gold today, I know you like this, Coach. If you guys are
uh,
looking at this, the 20, 50, and 200 moving average, the colors are a little messed up here. Let me change the color so we can see this a little bit more clearly. Purple and white. So the gold moving average is the 50. Sorry, gold is the 20, purple is the 50, and the white one is the 200 moving average. And I'll let you take that one from there, Coach.
well, there we go. We're in an obvious. I don't want to, an obvious uptrend, right? It's at
Right,
near all-time highs.
right.
Um, so I want, from my perspective of learning to take one side of the market, you know, in that situation, okay, it's sold. Let's see what it does at the 200. And man, look at that. It bounced. How much time? And look at the volume down there.
Yeah,
So,
this is on a 30. They tried to sell it into it, and all of that selling got absorbed.
coach, this is the classic. This is the one that high volume off the 200.
Yep.
And then the next one we had lower volume of buying, but once we get above that high of that bouncing off the 200, uh, it's one of my favorite trades.
Yep. So what Coach Paul is talking about is this candle that was 9 a.m. Central Time. We're looking at a 30-minute chart right now. 2544 half is the high of the candle, where the 200 moving average was on the 30-minute was right around 2530. We're going to go down to a shorter time frame to see it a little clearer, but I'm going to put a line at the high of that candle. And really what we're talking about is, selling came in here. They tried to sell it. We need selling, obviously, for the market to push lower. But we ran into that level I've heard MP call, a 200 moving average, the Great Wall, where when the market starts to trend, we see, you want to see the shorter term moving averages hold if you're in a trend. But a lot of times we'll see the market come down, test that 200, and have a really strong reaction to it. If we're looking at gold, look at the last time we traded around the 200, right? We had some really nice buying come above it to push us above it, and then a trend where the 20 and the 50 then crossed it. But that 200 moving average, let's look at, I'm going to mark out the time it hit it. So again, 2530 half was where that 200 moving average was. And then we'll go to a 3-minute chart, Coach.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's
There it is.
one candle. It's a clear volume anomaly. Maybe this was a reaction to that news as well, because it was around the time that the report was supposed to come out. So maybe whoever was trading gold got the number a little bit early. But if we frame out that candle from a 3-minute perspective, we never traded lower than it at that point. You're talking about the close outside of
Look
it.
at that.
Yeah,
It's like the middle finger. It's like,
really.
wow.
Yeah. Really nice. And it also made you wait a little bit, right? Where, we've talked about this potentially being a trade entry. And again, anything we're talking about is for educational purposes only. Nothing is saying,
Yeah.
hey, you should take this trade. And part of the reason Coach Paul and I like to do this at this time is because the markets are closed. So we can kind of do, going back to basketball coaching, game film, right? We want to watch what happened so we can react in real time. But a lot of times we see this with this heavy volume move into a demand area, a moving average, whatever you have as a level. We couldn't push
Yeah.
below it. We had, the highs. We got to close outside. 25.40 was the high, and it made you wait, right? There was drawdown in this trade. There was at least 9 points of drawdown if you bought it right at the highs, but the market never traded below those prices again. And I think there is, we can get into that risk management conversation. Can you sit through a 9 point drawdown in gold before the market moves in your direction? If it sounds like a lot, micro gold is always a thing as well. But what do you think about
Uh,
gold today, Coach?
I love micro gold. You just said it. How many accounts are going to, in that shorter time, suffer through $900?
Right,
Or you can, one of the things, it's just scale down. Like I said, I started at the mid-am, those original minis. That's why when you're learning, uh, you need to be able to survive, right? Here, that's a $90 trade,
right,
all right, if you use one micro.
right,
If you buy it halfway, maybe you do two micros. It's just the gold is at all-time highs. Now, what is the average true range on the daily? I have it here is $44. That's $4,400
with the one lot. Yep.
a day with a one lot. Okay, I, I trade. I lose more than I win. So I can't. I have to really be. I can't be trading the big gold contract myself. I can't do it. I don't. I don't. First of all, there you're gonna. That's a lot of risk. And then when you have a lot of risk, you're over leveraged, and it leads to over trading. And how many times? Let me ask people in the audience: how many times you've tried? And I've done this. Tried to buy that, but get spooked out 3, 4 times, and now I'm down. I'm down more than the 900, and maybe I'm blown an account.
Yeah. Yep. Where the right, because we don't put on any guarantees, right? So who's to say that this trade is the one that's going to work out? Um, we don't know. We don't know. So you get scared, like, oh, I can't take that loss, right? Like that's going to be too big.
It's yeah. That sets off all the bad habits. I call in turnovers in football and basketball, right? What kills the game? You
Right.
can't win if you turn it over.
Right. Yeah. I
Um,
I would, man, that's such a great point. Go ahead.
right?
I was
I
about to
think
go into basketball mode. I haven't coached in
you're in the
over a year,
basketball
but
mode, coach.
no, I would rather. I would tell my kids all the time, right? I would rather a shot attempt than a turnover, right? Than a silly turnover, right? Where you're trying to cross someone up, do something fancy, do a move that you never practiced before. Like, yo, don't do too much, just shoot the ball. But we're here to talk about markets, coach. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, it's a great example. Um, it's a great example. Uh, trade. I tell you what, I think the best place to trade right now is micros and gold.
There you go.
It gives you a lot of opportunity. There's if you have, by the way, it's a process. You have your process, and you can frame out your risk. It's the best place to trade right now.
There we go. I like that, and especially coming from a one lot trader in 10 different markets, right? Where I
Mhm.
don't know how much I've actually seen Coach Paul trade gold, but hearing you say that, there's a reason for that, right? So if anyone's taking notes or anything like that, you'll get accustomed to how Coach Paul and I deliver information, whatever it is. And again, this is all for education. It's not a suggestion to do anything, but my ears are kind of perking up hearing Coach Paul say that because in the year of working with you gold has kind of been on the back burner. So
Yeah.
very interesting, coach. Very interesting. Questions in the chat. We got about 10 minutes left. We're going to keep this segment to about an hour. I got a question from His Royal Trades. Coach Jay, do you have a certain static volume threshold on gold that you watch to exceed, or is it more fluid relative to the nearby candles? Uh, Great question. there was a time where I would look at the average volume in a market and, wait for opportunity there. But I'll show you exactly kind of how I would do that real quick. This volume average, right? We can see this volume average below the charts here. When the market is consistently below that average, the way I'm reading it is there may be less potential for an opportunity when the market is consistently below that average, right? But for a volume anomaly, that's going to uh, be relative to the candles that trade around it, right? So this is all high volume time here. Obviously, the markets are open at this time. And then we have, the middle finger candle, as we called it, right? Where, hey, something happened here, right? So here, I don't even need to know what the value is. I think there was a time where I would look at like, oh, yeah, it needs to trade over 5,000 contracts. I simplified it to where is there an anomaly because something happened there, and then how has the market responded since that anomaly printed. So just trying to figure out those, and then what you'll see is if you start doing it relative to the contracts that traded around it, you'll start to see anomalies. I'm going to go back to the ES for a second. You'll start to see anomalies where relative to the time frame traded, right? This is the ES. This is 5:30 Central Time. Look at this candle compared to everything else around it. I'm going to frame that candle out real quick. The high of the candle is 56.26. The low is 56.23. Not a huge range. Actually, not a ton of volume if we zoom out, right?
But for that time frame, yeah,
For that time frame,
that
that's a
time
lot
of
of
day.
exactly. If we look at that candle compared to what happened during the New York session, that candle didn't mean anything as far as a volume perspective. But the markets don't forget price. So, and I've heard Hogue say this sometimes as well, where, and I think this is why this happens when the market makes all-time highs or makes a move prior to most of the participants being able to get involved. Those participants want to get involved at those prices, right? We see this what is looks like an inconsequential volume spike relative to the daytime frame, but in the nighttime somebody traded some volume there, right? You come back, trade those prices, and bounce from there. So when you're looking at volume, to me, it's important to look relative to the time frame that you're trading.
What price is that?
Uh,
I can't see it too well.
that 56.24 is right in the middle of that. That's where your pivot was.
Yeah.
It meant something to someone.
um. So, great analysis, Coach, because I mean, at that time, that's relative. That's that time of day. Also,
Right.
that volume. Look around it. It dwarfs now, but it's all relative. At that time, something happened. That buying
Right.
m- turned that market around.
Correct. And then we got another one. If you use a 1 minute chart with the volume, will this make the zone smaller with less risk for your stop? Yeah, it will, right? 1 minute candles are going to be smaller than 3 minute candles, just by nature, most of the time, because there's 2 minutes left, 2 minutes more in a 3 minute candle. Um, the reason I use a 3 minute is just because it gives me a little bit more information than a 1 minute, right? I find that if I use a 1 minute, I get a lot more false signals, and the 3 minutes kind of quiet some of those false signals out. Where I don't want to try to jump at everything. I want to see, over somewhat of an extended period of time. Obviously short time frame, but how the market responds to these levels. But you have another one here, right? Here's a 1 minute volume spike in gold. This was at 2 p.m. Sorry, 1 p.m. Central Time. There's another one, and that's a 1 minute candle, right? We framed it out. The market closed above it, and off to the races.
Yeah, that volume spikes really are. I'm glad to work with you. I really learned a lot from those. It brought me down to being in the pit again. Um, One of the things too, if you go down to the 1 minute, and by the way, I swore that off, but lately I've been watching the 1 minute for day trading.
Oh,
Um, you're going to trade more, right? Even though you're going to have smaller, you're going to trade more. The more you trade, the more disciplined you have to be.
right.
who was that today? I heard on Top Step made, made money. What do you make? But he traded 1,500 contracts
Oh, yeah, I
in
can't
the
remember
micro.
the trader's name. But yeah, I mean, and that's not the first time, right?
Yeah,
3,300 contracts traded in the micros, made 14 grand. Can't knock you if you make 14 grand, but that is a ton of discipline that I personally do not have. Uh,
and one of the things I've learned is your personality. But know thyself when you begin to trade.
correct.
What kind of personality? We're not all the same. I personally couldn't do that.
Right.
But hats off. I mean,
Yeah.
man, if he can continue to do that, he's gonna be a market maker,
Pretty much. Pretty much. I think at one
right?
point it was the value was like 1% of the daily uh, volume in the micros. And again, that's kind of a function of trading in a sim account where it wasn't an XFA. Fills might be a little bit
Yeah,
different, in live markets, but again, able to make money from it. How do you click that much? Yeah, Andrew, I don't know. I think I would get tired. I would need a nap. Uh,
hotkeys.
but if I'm napping on 14K, I could sleep pretty well. Uh, you got anything in gold before we move on, Coach? We got a few minutes left. Oh, I also want to
Okay,
mention.
I'm
Go ahead.
I'm good.
Awesome. So
Let's go to the next one.
we covered the major four. I'm looking at if there's anything else, any other outside markets you want to discuss, Coach. I know sometimes that's your thing. Something that we might
Bitcoin,
Bitcoin. All right, let's pull it up real quick.
mini Bitcoin. I love
Yep,
that contract.
man, and I see why.
Yeah, that's we'll look at the daily.
There's that 200 moving average again.
Yep. It's right up against the 20-day moving, and I think we closed right at it. I like this as a good place to start trying to buy it. If it can hold this level, it could explode. We're above. Once we get above the 20, we'll see. From my experience as a CTA, they come in um, to buy it.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean, and by the way, doesn't mean they're going to be right. But it gives me an opportunity to lean on that.
Nice.
Uh, and then micro, we were just talking about micro gold, and micro Bitcoin is a place you can put 2 or 3 or 4 on without and be comfortable.
Yeah.
I can't say it enough. Trading, you got to be comfortable.
Yep.
If
Yeah.
you're not comfortable, you know,
And
you're gonna make
it's
decisions.
naturally uncomfortable, I think, because there's always risk involved.
Yeah.
There's always risk
Well,
involved. So go ahead.
one thing I've learned, and it wasn't that long ago, is the only certainty we have in this environment is uncertainty.
Yep.
I mean, deal with that. So you have to be successful. You have to embrace uncertainty. Learn how to embrace it. And as we go forward, we'll we'll bring some examples of embracing uncertainty, and that really
Nice.
comes down to risk management.
Love it. So I think that is it for at the buzzer today. Thank you, Coach Paul. Welcome back. Great to have you back. Thanks everyone for hanging out.
Th-
Don't forget, Topstep TV is almost at full day coverage, right? We're almost at 24 hours. We have Nick Fortick doing his market kickoff at 4:45 Central Time every Sunday. If you have not joined that session, if you saw Nick on Topstep TV today during
Nice
fast
thing.
markets, Nick, if you're still here, man, great trade on that short. Nick uses a lot of options information in his trades. Called out a short in the ES maybe 10 points before we even got there, and then executed on the trade as well.
Oh,
So
yeah,
you
he
love
was
to see it.
comfortable.
Yes,
Oh, I
very
loved it. There's a comfortable trader.
for sure, for sure. So Nick does that every Sunday, 4:45 Central Time. Of course, we got Dakota with slow markets at 7:30 Central Time, Sunday through Thursday. Uh, Myself and Coach Paul here with At the Buzzer every day, Monday through Friday, 3:15 Central, and Deanna 3:30 a.m. Central Time, Monday through Thursday with the London Open. I was actually up this morning, was able to watch a little bit of Deanna's session this morning, so great stuff as always. And then we have the coaches in Discord as well. I saw Coach Vince in the chat. Shout out to you, Coach Vince. Coach Vince is always doing a session in Discord Monday through Thursday as well at 7 Central. And then right before him, we have Coach Ray at 6 p.m. Central. I join those sessions as often as I can, even if I'm just listening in the background while I'm doing other things, eating dinner, maybe just hanging out, working out, whatever. I learned something from Coach Vince literally this week, and I've been doing this 11 years. Coach Paul, you said you got more trading experience than I have life experience, and you're still learning, which is an amazing thing because this is a constant going thing. So make sure you join those sessions. Coach, you got anything before we go?
Great to be back, Coach.
Good to have you back.
And I look forward to working with you again. And let's get ready to play the game, manage our risk, and make some money.
Before we go, let's just real quick news check tomorrow. You're here on Top Step TV as well, but we do have jobless claims out tomorrow. So you guys remember what I did last week, kind of framing out the news candle. I'm going to do the same thing with that jobless claims candle tomorrow. Identify where the high and the low is of that 7:30 Central Time candle, and then that should give us potential areas to trade, right? I'm looking again at that 20K in the NASDAQ to see how the market responds around that. And jobless claims might give us that. We have a bunch of other stuff out as well, but that's probably the big one. So just pay attention to that. You don't need to trade in the number. You can trade after it and manage your risk that way. We don't talk to you the rest of the day. Have a great day. Trade well, manage your risk, and we will talk to you all tomorrow. Thanks again, Coach.
Have a great evening, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.